Episode 23. Believe it or not, I actually have a guest today. I got out of my little snow cave. Actually, I wish it was a snow cave up in Montana. It's been a little bit light on the snow, hoping that that starts to fall pretty soon. But I got out of my happy place and went on the road and linked up with a very good friend of mine, a longtime friend, John Welbourn, at his Power Athlete Symposium in Austin, Texas. We had a little bit of spare time. Figured the only fitting thing that we could do during that spare time was to throw some microphones on a table and rap a bit. And that's exactly what we did. We tried to squeeze in some high-quality stuff in the 45 minutes we had before the kickoff of the symposium. He's an interesting cat. If you take him at first appearances, I think he's just under 8 feet tall. Basically looks like a dinosaur, but wears shoes. And if you think of him like that, you're drastically underestimating what the man is capable of doing. I love talking to the guy. Wildly intelligent, and oh yeah, adult language alert. If you listen to this podcast with little ones, earmuffs might be appropriate. There was a little bit of adult language, so you've been warned. If you don't like that type of stuff, don't listen to it. Hope you enjoy it.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north or south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. Get cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
Should we try to knock out the most awesome podcast ever in 45 minutes?
Done. 3, 2, 1, go.
Yeah, most of the time I don't try to put a boundary on the time, but yeah, we're limited on both. Well, actually not on both, but we're limited on time. All right, Austin, Texas. What are we doing here in Austin, Texas? Stop looking at your phone. Put it away. You're like a child.
So what are we doing here in Austin, Texas? This is the 2017 Power Athlete Symposium.
Which is?
It is a... Fuck, I don't even know what this thing is. It's really just a over the year, we run into really cool people through the podcast, just our own personal networks. And it's always cool at the end of the year to bring everybody together for a speaking engagement and just kind of bring everybody in to kind of replug and just a way for us to get together and rally before the end of the year and kind of a year in review in a lot of ways. It started pretty small with just a few guys in a gym. I think he spoke that first year, where we just wanted a couple people to come in and wanted to train and hang out, and we invited a couple speakers. You were one. I would always get up and give a talk on either vision or culture or being a CEO or running a company or performance.
State of the union type of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to kind of bring everybody back and just kind of plug everybody back in and let them hear the message fresh and what's going on. And a lot of great stuff had come out of the years past in that, 1 year it was, I want to certify all my coaches. So I want everybody to be a Power Athlete Certified Coach. So that kind of pushed us with the methodology. People said they wanted to have affiliates with the gyms. And I'm like, I don't necessarily know if I want to have Power Athlete, Milwaukee out there. But I would definitely allow people to affiliate, and carry the banner and say, hey, we're a Power Athlete, certified gym.
Yeah.
People wanted to come and train. They wanted to hear new stuff. And it just kind of grew from there, and now it's kind of grown into this, 300 people, 13 speakers, 3 days here in Austin, Texas. So it's pretty cool.
I mean, definitely larger than last year in Newport, which was an awesome location, though. That building, like the glass all over the place.
Yeah, that's at the City Hall. That whole glass building is epic. I mean, that was really a cool location and a great venue and super successful. We had some great speakers. So, obviously we moved the company from Newport Beach here to Austin and wanted to try to pick up where we left off.
So, I mean, I think I understand what Power Athlete is now, and you and I have a history of kind of where it started and where it all began, but I'm going to let you tell that story. So what is Power Athlete? Well, and I'll let you tell it in the way that you want to, but also work backwards for people who are unfamiliar. I very rarely on the podcast talk about like any strength and conditioning stuff other than like an initial questions on like, how do I train now? Which you could probably rattle off the answer because it's the same way that I trained when I was with you. But so we're at a symposium. Take me back in time to when it started.
Oh, wow. Okay. Let me see how far back I can take this. I got invited to come to a CrossFit Level 1 in Huntington Beach at CrossFit Marina So I cruise over there on a Saturday, walk in, and all of a sudden I sit down to hear Brian McKenzie give up the worst nutrition talk in the history of nutrition talks. And as I'm sitting there just fucking appalled at not only the delivery, all the information, I hear this guy next to me go, "What the fuck?" And he looks over, and at that point, our friendship was born. That person was Andy Stumpf.
I also believe I looked at you, and just because you were so big, I was like, "Hey, man, how long have you been a ballerina?"
Yeah, you made some fucking comment, and I was like, "Yeah, slightly longer than your mom." And it just started from there, and it was this epic shit talking. And it just kind of really grew into a friendship, man. We grew into, training partners and friends, and, it just really just exploded from there. And then I went back and played for the Patriots.
I was going to say, at that point in time when you,
we're still playing in the
you were
NFL.
still in the NFL. Yeah, we'll have to get to that too.
Yeah, and I remember competing for the CrossFit Games and fucking filming every second counts. Remember we did like 18 workouts in like 7 days, and I remember we were at the Oak Course, and I just like started crying. I was like, I don't want to work out anymore.
I make an appearance in that movie for people who haven't seen it as John's life coach
and mentor. Yeah, I mean it's and then after I got injured in New England and came home, and then Greg Glassman hit me up about starting CrossFit football. And that's kind of where that really grew. And I remember coming down and visiting you down in San Diego when you were still living on base, and us going over the original kind of CrossFit football workouts. How should this look? And I mean,
literally sitting there when you say that too, we had like a binder, kind of like the one in front of me, like basically a paper binder, and we were writing down workouts. Like,
this sounds
is
fucking
300 reps too much?
And I remember we're sitting in your backyard around like a fire pit.
It was a Costco fire pit.
Yeah, with no fire, which was even more funny.
We were out of propane at the time.
Yeah, fucking, details. And, we crafted those first workouts. And what was interesting
it's like
is
50, right?
No, it was 300 was how many we ended up with. So we have there's a something I have floating around. It's like the original 300 the original 300 CrossFit football workouts. And one day we'll put it out. I mean, people always wanted it. And what was interesting was some of it was so fucking awful that I actually learned how to program by looking at that and being like, and then we would go do the workout and be like, there's no fucking way that this has any adaptation or anything. So a lot of good, I guess you could say, restraint came from those workouts. It's like, oh yeah, they can do 4,000 fucking overhead squats with 405.
But I will say too, from those original workouts, there were some workouts that had some meat and bones.
Well, I mean, to this day, and I'm sure it upsets CrossFit, the hardest CrossFit workout ever programmed, courtesy of Andy Stumpf, is known as Casual.
But that one, we weren't there. I
called you on the phone. I was like, hey, Andy, we're going to do a hero workout. Would you give it? And you like fucking blurted this thing out. And I was like, no, you're like, program it or you're a pussy. And I'm like, all right, we're in it. And to this day, people are like, oh, that's the worst CrossFit workout. And then people are like, it's not a CrossFit workout. It's a CrossFit football workout.
It is. Yeah, it's hard. Look it up. You'll be able to find it.
Yeah,
so that was, that was a long way away from the symposium, though. There's a lot of stuff that happened in between.
Yeah, I mean, so that was really the beginning of CrossFit football, and then it was, hey, you got to launch a website. So after CrossFit, Lauren and Greg offered me to do this thing. I came back 30 days later, and we launched a website, which day one, which would have been March 31st, we had 17,000 hits in like 100-plus countries.
March 31st, what year?
2009.
Okay.
So that was the beginning, and then they said, hey, you need a seminar. So I remember we put together a seminar, and that was kind of all she wrote, and we started teaching this CrossFit football method. And then I remember just the friction with CrossFit starting, and it just like it went from like, hey, we were the the new baby in the block. I mean, everybody was fucking like we were the apple of the teacher's eye to the fucking slutty 13-year-old girl that nobody wants to invite over to their house. I mean, it was a fucking like a night and day. I was like, I thought you guys asked me to do this and we were friends and you were supporting me. Now all you guys are doing is trying to erode me and undermine me every fucking step of the way. And I know where it started. There was a military gig that Greg and them were at, and they came in and they were teaching, and all the questions were about CrossFit football. How, strength templates, this and this. And all of a sudden, through paranoia or whatnot, then it looked like we were trying to take over and they had to fucking destroy us. And I remember being like, when Greg called and told me this, I was like, come on, dude. Like, you fucking asked me to do this thing. I was going to go to law school.
Yeah. And I don't know if you would have graduated, but I like where your head was at.
Oh, dude, I would be a fucking attorney right about now, just crushing it, driving around a Porsche in Southern California, with Ray-Ban sunglasses on.
For those of you who've never met or seen John, he's 6'13".
I'm 6'6".
Yeah, he's not a small individual. I cannot imagine you like buttoned up in a suit and tie making a verbal argument, like just smashing your head or your head. That would actually be more impressive than your hand.
My brother Eddie is, one of like the top lawyers in Southern California.
He has a slightly different build than you, though.
Yeah, he's a little bit smaller. And dude, he, and I remember him telling me, like, when I wanted to do, when CrossFit offered me, he's like, dude, just go to law school, 3 years, you're out. We'll go into practice together. I have so much business. I need you to do this. And I was like, well, I think I'm going to try this fitness thing for a little. The fuck was I thinking?
Yeah, but if you hadn't gone down that road, we probably wouldn't have been sitting here.
We wouldn't have been.
So
not at all.
The leap from CrossFit football to what is now Power Athlete. What would you say? Is it the same thing? Is it different? Is it more focused?
It's 180 degrees different. So what I was asked to do with CrossFit football was I was asked to. So the way it was explained to me was CrossFit sits in the middle with fitness. They wanted bookends. They wanted a endurance deal for endurance community with Brian McKenzie and CrossFit Endurance. And then they wanted to side on the power sports like CrossFit football, power, CrossFit power, something like that, sitting on the other sports that they could effectively go in and win the hearts and the minds of all high school, like football, track, like just anything that involved big horsepower, short duration. And so that was what was explained to me. And then in a drunken tirade, as Greg screamed at me, people want to be powerful, not elite. And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, they do. But it was like that was the way the mission was explained to me, and what they wanted me to do was translate my training in terms of like strength, metabolic conditioning, sprinting, what I knew about training athletes and training myself. They wanted me to translate that into a language that CrossFitters could understand. They wanted something that was familiar to the CrossFit community, that was power based. They just didn't want I remember being like, you got to have rounds instead of sets, like triplets, couplets, little short conditioning workouts, and I was like, I can do that. I can speak CrossFitness, and I translated my training into CrossFit. Now, what was interesting, and really where Power Athlete came from, is I started a blog shortly after I started CrossFit Football because I got about 200 fucking emails a day from people asking questions, and back then people were really willing to share, and there wasn't like a lot of information out there.
There was a void of information. I would say
huge, and I started responding to these emails by everyone. Feeling like that, like they emailed me and I owed them something.
And then you realized you had not enough time in the day.
So I started a blog called Talk to Me Johnny.
Yep.
I was sitting there and
TTMJ for short.
TTMJ. I was sitting there watching my favorite movie, or documentary rather, about this drifter named John Rambo. Gets roughed up by a small town cop.
Yep.
And
familiar with the story.
And there's a line in there where it's Kevin Leader to Raven, talk to me, Johnny. And I thought, man, this will be perfect. So I started Talk to Me, Johnny, and 300 blog posts. And what's hilarious is people like 7 years ago, like something I wrote, people will still like post it and talk about it. And I'm like, dude, I wrote that a long time ago.
But powerful, especially I think when it comes to writing, this stuff is powerful and it transcends a lot of the time. Like the verbal word, for whatever reason, doesn't. Sometimes it sticks with me, but if you can find something like that and it reads you and it sits you back, like, okay, that stands the test of time for sure.
Yeah, I mean that 42 things I'd learned up to 2013, like
awesome
went viral. I mean, we had something like 27 million hits. I mean, it was some like astronomical, to the point where I had to like pay more for WordPress hosting because of the amount of spike. They like all of a sudden ding my credit card, and I'm like, what? Oh, wait, the hosting went up by like
20x,
yeah, like
probably.
20x. And it was that went viral, and it was just basically life lessons that my grandmother and my mom and people had just told me that I remembered I used to live by, like it's better to live like a farmer than a bartender. And then all of a sudden a bunch of people that were bartenders got butthurt, and I'm like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, my grandmother told me it's better to get up early, fucking work all day, come home, go to bed when it gets dark, then fucking hang out with the drunks. I'm fucking sorry that's your job, but that's the way it rolls.
Well, they missed that it's not necessarily talking about bartenders per se. It's more metaphorical in that sense.
Well, people have this deal where on the internet, anything that's said is like a personal counterpoint, and they can't understand the general. They can only understand, and I'll quote Greg Glaxman on this, in that people fail at the margins of their experience.
I would agree with that for sure.
I mean, he said that to me, and I was like, I don't know if he stole that or he made that up, but that might be one of the more impactful things anybody's ever said to me, in that people fail at the margins of their experience, because your experience takes you here, and most people can only understand a situation based off their own experience, and it takes either an educated or intelligent person to empathize or even put themselves in the like embody the other person to see where, to see that counterpoint.
To treat it as a two-way mirror instead of a one, essentially?
Well, I always think for you, in your job, being as a SEAL, like going out on target and like kind of thinking like, what do we think these guys are going to like? I know what we're going to do. What do we think they're going to do? And you're probably sitting there being like, if I was that dude, I'd be hiding right there. And sure enough, he's there.
We spent high 90th percentile of our planning not trying to say, hey, this is, remember how we do this? Like, no. That's what we trained to. It was, what's the most dangerous course of action? What's the most likely course of action? What's the most deadly course of action? We would just break down everything we were going to do. And to really plan effectively, you basically spend your time thinking about your enemy or your opponent, depending on what environment you're in. And you war game it out. If they do this, what am I going to do? Just to try to stay a step ahead, and so you're not trying to be reactive in the moment.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing in football. I mean, I used to watch guys on film, and you look, and when the money's on the line and they got to get a third down stop and it's third and short, we know that those dudes are going to pinch. We know this dude's going to do this because he's done this fucking every time.
Do they really get that habitually repetitive?
Oh, yeah. I mean, dude, I can think of, when I was playing for the Eagles, our defensive coordinator, Jim, I can't remember. He's since passed away. I can't remember his last name for the life of me. If there was a situation where we needed something, he would start screaming, casino, which was an all-out blitz, and they knew that they were going to bring everybody they could. Even if we got burned, they were going to hit the quarterback and fucking knock him out of the game. And I remember being like, like looking at the situation, I'm like, they're going to fucking call it casino. They're going to get burned, but they're going to light the quarterback up or hurt somebody.
Yeah.
And even he lets go low of the ball, and that's going to be the difference. And it fucking worked all the time.
So how long did you play ball for in your life? I mean, we'll get to the NFL, but when did you actually first?
14, freshman in high school.
So you didn't pick up a football? You didn't play Pop Warner?
No, I thought it was stupid. I thought football was the dumbest sport on the planet. I thought it looked like a bunch of big fat guys pushing each other around. I didn't understand it. I never watched it, and I never had dreams of ever wanting to ever play football. So
what changed your mind about that impression?
My brothers told me all the cool guys in high school play football.
That'll actually do it when you're in high school,
and it will. And I've told the story. I got into martial arts. My brother Rob got his butt kicked when he was about 10 years old, and my dad's not a fighter. But he's, been a lawyer and smart enough to know that,
he fights in different ways, not with his fists.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, I don't think my dad's ever been in a fist fight. But my dad was smart enough to realize that, if he couldn't do it, somebody should. So he took my brother down to like the karate studio. This guy, John Habura, had a martial arts studio. So he takes my brother down. After a couple of weeks, my brother started beating up on my other brother and I. And so my dad took all three of us down, and I fucking loved it. I went every single day. I was like, I'll come 7 days a week. I love the training part. I love like the hard floor. I love this. I mean, the throws. I mean, fucking it hurt. And they were fucking. It was old school, like Japanese style stuff, where like the dude had like a bamboo bokken, and we'd be like in a horse stance, and he'd come over and he'd fucking whack you if you got lazy. I mean, shit today. I mean, this is 35 years ago.
Yeah, you're getting carted off in silver bracelets if you pull that stuff.
No, dude.
Today.
Like, I mean, he like I was punching and my thumb was out, and he like twisted my thumb back and like dislocated my thumb, and then like reset it, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, like that level of stuff. I mean, it was pretty brutal. I mean, we punched and my brothers and I used to go early and train, and I loved it. And then I thought kicking was kind of dumb after a while, and I went and I tried to do some kickboxing stuff, but I just really liked the boxing part, and I just went for that, and I really, really loved just watching boxing. I remember watching like, Tommy Hearns, Marvin Hagler. I remember watching Tyson and Riddick Bowe and just like all of those fighters. I mean, just to me, that fighting was super impactful. I remember my dad always was a fight fan, and like his buddies would come over and we would watch fights. And I remember, training, working the speed bag in the hands and this, and just learning to cut people off in the ring. And to me, that was what I really liked to do. And
that had to have helped you later on in your career.
You know what the scouting report was on me in the NFL?
A boxer with a helmet on?
No, fast. His hands are faster than everybody else's. Once he gets his hands on you, and he can always play 2/3 in the side out. I mean, so when you box, you learn to cut people off in the ring, and my hand speed was far better than other people's.
And for people who are unfamiliar, you were an offensive lineman, right?
Yeah, I played guard and tackle.
That's the same position, but on the either side of the center?
Yeah, so I played directly to the left of the center when I was in Philadelphia. So I played left guard for 5 years, and then I played right tackle for the Chiefs for 3 years, and then I played a right guard for a year with the Chiefs. but I also played left tackle and I played all the other positions.
And for people who don't understand what I'm talking about with the speed of the hands, just watch a pro football game, but only watch the linemen. You guys are going to town.
Well, that, and also I learned fairly easy or fairly quickly, about closing distance. And the one thing that I always loved was how Tyson could get in close on a guy and fucking punish his body. And I used to take that same approach, but I used to use what I called my third fist, which was my head. So we wore these helmets, which are, 8 to 9 pounds of fucking hard plastic.
Yeah.
And I was able to actually punch on guys, and then I would let them absorb in, and then I could basically extend and unlock my hips like fucking straight, and here you have a universal athletic position. I could extend with my head and literally fucking jab and hit them with repeated blows, but never lose position, which is
that legal to use your head like that?
Yeah, I mean,
frowned upon,
it's probably
perhaps?
frowned upon. But it was one of those things where I just learned to do it naturally from boxing, like how to get in close and then how to move and play with distance. And then the problem is a lot of guys do what's called lunging, where they try to do the same thing, but they fucking shoot their load. And then they fucking get swum, they get beat, and they get out of position. I could do it without ever losing position, and I could always keep in a good athletic position doing it. So
because if you lunge and fully extend, you got nowhere to. Once you reach that max distance, you got nowhere to go. Right?
Yeah, and you're extended, you can't move your feet. I could do it where I would basically fucking little short explosive lunge it, extension lunge kind of deal, but I didn't lose position to the point where we're watching film and. At the Eagles, and I remember my offensive line coach, we were watching something, he watched me, playing, and he looked at the young guys and he's like, don't ever fucking do this. If you guys do this, you're going to get cut. And they were like, what do you mean? They were like, Johnny's one of the only people I've ever seen that can do this. And I remember joking, that was my skill set.
Yeah.
And I looked at it I would put my head through it, this probably isn't, fuck it. This is probably the venue to say it if I'm ever going to say it. But I looked at it like a boxer like Tyson. I'm going to come out fast. I'm going to lay big fucking nasty blows. I'm going to try to hurt you early. And I want you to give up. And I knew that I could go out early with the fucking Prefontaine suicide pace, and I could take big nasty blows, big headshots, fucking try to hurt them. And most people would give up, and they didn't want to play anymore.
You have to assume that the guy on the other side of the ball is probably thinking the same thing, right?
No.
Really? Even at that level?
Yeah, no, dude. People don't want to take those type. People are not. At least most people that I played against were not willing to take that type of punishment. Were
they worried about longevity?
No, they just don't like the pain.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue that.
So for me, the
pain is not generally comfortable.
I mean, we were. I popped a rib out the other day, and I went and I got it reset. And the old man that was the chiro was working on me was like, "Man, did you ever break your clavicle?" I was like, yeah, I broke my collarbone when I was 4 years old. My older brother picked me up and slammed me down. I broke it. And he's like, did they reset it? I'm like, yeah, it dropped the next day. And then my neighbor set it in his kitchen. And then my mom made a little dish towel sling. And I had that for a couple months.
Was your neighbor at least a doctor?
Yeah, he was a doctor. Okay. And so the guy's like, wow, you were 4 years old and they set your fucking shoulder without anesthetic in a hospital, no x-rays. The doctor just set it. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, wow, that's a pretty good pain threshold. I'm like, yeah, when I was probably 10 years old, I got a cavity, and I had the guy drill my tooth for the cavity without Novocaine because I wanted to see what it felt like. And the doctor was like, he's like, I've seen grown adults be able to drill this thing. And then he's like, you didn't flinch. I mean, I dislocated fingers and reset them. I took a helmet to the shin and broke my leg clean in half and played 3 weeks later. Played 17 weeks with a broken leg.
No, thank you.
So for me...
But that started at 14, though. How was your first season of freshman football?
Awful.
What did you play? Line?
Yeah, I played defensive line, offensive line. Football is a really interesting game in that it's it doesn't make a lot of sense, and you kind of have to make sense of it yourself. I don't and I still joke I don't know all the rules.
Yeah.
Things they throw a penalty or something happen. I'd be like, I don't know what the fuck that just is about. And then somebody would explain it. I'd be like, oh, okay, it makes sense. They'd be like, how do you not know that? I'm like, man, I don't touch the ball. My only job is that I got to basically just whoop this dude's ass for 3 hours, and that's good. And I'll compartmentalize. I don't I'll tell you what everybody else can do. If you ask me, hey, what route are they running? I probably know. But for the most part, I'm not concerned with that.
Hey, focused on your job.
Yeah. Which is one-on-one fist fighting a dude. trying to, basically prove how good or bad I am every Sunday in front of millions of people 70 times.
So got on the football field the first time your freshman year. You got a scholarship to Berkeley, right?
Yeah, so I was...
so obviously, when did you start realizing, like, oh, wow, this might be the vehicle to college?
I didn't even realize that at all. I remember I was a sophomore and I was a pretty good player. I just, started lifting weights. I went from like 160 to like 200 in a year. And got way bigger, grew 2 inches, got stronger, went from a bench of like 115 to like 225 in like, short amount of time.
I struggle imagining you at 160 pounds, to be
6 foot, 165, it's what I was a freshman in high school. And so we roll in and all of a sudden, like, I start getting like letters from schools. So there was a pretty good, my training partner was a guy named Tasso Papadakis, who's a Greek kid. And he was like the strongest kid in America under 16. He squatted like 500 for 10 at 15.
At 15?
Yeah, 500, 495 of collars for 10 reps at 15 years old.
That's monumentally impressive.
Yeah, and he looked the part. He looked like a pro bodybuilder at 15.
Yeah, just an action figure.
Oh, dude, insane. I've to this day, I've never seen a kid more physically developed than him. And he went on to play fullback and linebacker for SC and had tore some ACLs and didn't really get to where he wanted to go in terms of playing the NFL. But he was a world class player, and school showed up to watch him. And I was just some lanky kid too, and I was his training partner, and school started sending me letters, and then I filled them out, sent them back, and had a pretty good, kept playing. And then next thing you know, I had a gang of scholarship offers.
So double major at Berkeley, right?
Well, I graduated in 4 years and then did my master's in my 5th year.
What do you have your degrees in?
Rhetoric and education.
But you can't spell.
I'm not good at proofreading.
I have screen grabs that I'll post that prove that it's THE, not TEH. No, it's and I ask those questions just because I think most people like myself who had never met a professional football player before meeting you, you're kind of taken aback. You would think, and same thing as people who meet military guys. Oh, they're just some meathead dude. And then the reality is most of the people are
meatheads.
Some of them are. Some are educated. Some are intelligent. Some are both. But to me, I have found it surprising. And, when I first met you, I was like, damn, dude, there's a lot of layers to the onions besides just taping your hands up and using them as clubs.
Yeah, but I probably one of the, I will tell you, the life I lived in the NFL was fucking beyond the coolest thing you could ever do. I wish everybody in their
we're getting there. Don't worry.
I wish everybody got to be a 10-year NFL player and like live that life. It was fucking cool as shit. But for me personally, one of the best times of my life, and being a dad and having kids being married has been epic too. So I can't
it's
say
a different epic, but I agree with you.
But being in college to me was probably one of the most special, most amazing points in my life, and I'll tell you why. I got to go to school to UC Berkeley, which is like a cornucopia of ideas, attitudes, right, left, middle, center, everything.
Would you say it still is?
Yeah, it is. I think you only see a lot of the negative and a lot of the bullshit.
You see what makes the news. You don't see the rest of the stuff yet.
But what was cool was I got to go to this place. I got to play football. And lift weights and train and play football. But the cooler part was I got to finally, because in high school, like they have you take the classes, like you have to take all these classes. Mm-hmm. I wasn't necessarily inspired by much, even though I got decent grades and a good SAT score. It just wasn't like something which felt like it was missing in the education space for me.
Well, it's not your path; it's the high school path.
Yeah,
you need X, you need Y. Once you get these, then we will allow you to graduate.
Exactly. So then I graduated, go to Berkeley, and I remember them being like, "What classes do you want to take?" I was like, I don't know. And I sat down and they were like, okay, well, let's give you an education class. Let's do this. And they gave me kind of like a really diverse roster that first semester or in that first year. And I remember I had to take an English. So it was like, do you want to take like English Lit? Do you want to take rhetoric? And I was like, what's this rhetoric thing? And they were like, oh, it's like an argumentative English philosophy thing. And I'm like, I'll take rhetoric 1. And all of a sudden I go in there and I got this like education 40 class with Pedro Noguera. And I remember he walks in the first day and he says, if you're white and you're a male, you're the problem and you're the oppressor. And here's and here's what you need to know. You need to know that's how people think of you. So get used to it.
It's a strong opening for day one class.
Yeah. And this is, 1994. And I remember being like, okay, like if I'm the oppressor, then you know what? I need to realize instead of being upset about it, I need to understand my position and how people are viewing me, and I need to work within this framework. and I need to somehow guide through it. And I remember, I never wore any of my football stuff to school. I wore glasses.
How was the Berkeley football team? Do they do? It's a D1 school.
Yeah,
isn't it?
we were Pac-10.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't do well when I was there, but it's a good school. Good football school. But I didn't really ever pub up to my teacher that I was a football player or this, and he just said, "Hey, man, just fucking be a student."
Yeah.
And I remember going to my rhetoric class and sitting down and them being, "Hey, we're going to read these books and you're going to write and stuff." And I'm like, "Fuck, this is great." I remember I went and just started reading, and it was as if everything opened to me. And I remember I aced that class, and I was like, "This is great." And I was like, "Man, I think I'm going to do this for a major. I'd love to be a rhetoric major." And then I was like, you know what? Maybe it'd be smarter to be a business major. So I took all the business classes and calculus and this, and I remember working my ass off, and it was I was going for this, and all of a sudden this is my third year, and I tear my ACL. Towards the end of the year, all of a sudden I have ACL reconstruction, and I'm trying to crutch to classes and study, and I got C's on everything, and I studied my ass off. And I remember I still had a rhetoric class, and I literally didn't study for anything. I just read the books. I went in, and it was A+. And I remember being like, dude, all I had to do was read the books. All of this stuff made sense to me. I really enjoyed taking the final. I aced it. And then this other shit I put in 20 hours a day studying for, and I barely pulled a C. And I'm like, maybe in life you look for what you have aptitude for.
Yeah, instead of square peg and round hole and just driving it in with a jackhammer.
Yeah, and forcing it. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do any of that business stuff. And I just went and did all the rhetoric. And I took a rhetoric of poetry class, which is so funny because I still, to this day, last night when we were talking, still to this day, I remember sitting in this guy Will West rhetoric of poetry class, which is so ironic. How can you make an argument about a poem? But it was they asked me what my favorite poem was, and I got up and I read Dylan Thomas, "Do not go gentle into that good night, rage against the dying light." That poem to me was who I was. I was not going to go gentle. I was not going to go away soft. That I was going to fucking stand up and fight for this thing, and fight in life. It's reading Eldritch's Wild at Heart, or some of these things and I remember reading all this stuff about different poets, and I remember reading the history and being like, dude, this guy was he was a poet, he was a fighter, this guy was a king, he was and so I realized that there was this warrior poet thing, and I thought to myself, I can be a scholar, I can be an athlete, I can be a professional athlete, I can do all of these things. I don't have to be one-dimensional. I can weld, and I can do this, and I can create, and I can be this Renaissance man. And to me, that's what I wanted in my life. I didn't ever want to be one-dimensional. I wanted this person that could do everything. I wanted to be able to read and write and present and speak and fucking lift weights and train and fight and fit. I wanted everything. Yeah. And going there, that was a cool realization. And I did. I mean, I graduated in 4 years, and then I went on to grad school and was a student. Taught in the Oakland Public School District. Got drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles in the 4th round. Came in and started as a rookie, and I'm like, dude, I graduated from Berkeley, and have all this knowledge base, and now I get to go out and be a professional athlete. And I was feeling like I was approaching what I wanted to do in terms of this idea of being a Renaissance man, more than just this one-dimensional person.
How was the jump from college ball to pro ball?
The jump from high school to college was way more dramatic than college to the NFL.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it because you were closer in capacity? I mean, because when I was 18 and when I was 24, it's night and day. When I went through buds, I was 150 pounds. By the time I was in my early 20s, I was probably 190, 2 inches taller.
Yeah. So, the thing about this, okay, you're a senior in college is 22, 23 years old. I come in as a 17, 18-year-old kid. I didn't even own a razor. Yeah. And I'm this young kid coming in, I'm like, hey, what's happening? Let's go lift weights. And then all of a sudden,
I feel like you didn't sound like that, but I like the...
Yeah, your voice is cracking. You're like, okay, don't kick my ass, And then the difference of being a 24-year-old man who weighs 300 pounds and fucking benches 500, stepping on the field with 27, 30, 32-year-old men, way different.
Of similar size and scale and capacity.
Yeah, so it only took me a pretty short amount of time to become a starter in the NFL.
Yeah. So you played a decade Which, what's the average stat right now? About 3.3,
about 3 years.
3.1?
But that number's misleading.
How so?
Because in the NFL, you either can do it and you do it for 10 or 12 years, or you fucking have a cup of coffee and it kick you in the ass.
And then call yourself an NFL player the rest of your life?
Yeah, I mean, like you have a guy like Peyton Manning or Tony Gonzalez, and these dudes play 17 years, and you're like, for every dude that did that, there's a guy that just showed up, got his jersey, had a cup of coffee, and they fucking booted him.
Yeah. And is the world, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, the world and the life is probably what people would expect it to be.
Yeah.
Some of the stories you've told me over the years are like, what?
Yeah.
What was what's interesting to me about that world is I think most people have an idea of what going from having no money to that type of money, whatever they think that type of money is.
Well, here's the thing, man, and this is part of the thing that I was getting to in the when I was in college, and part of why I enjoyed it. My scholarship check was $740 a month. My parents kicked me an extra $300, so I had about $1,000 a month to live on. My rent was $475, and so our bills were about $25. I lived next door to a supermarket, made friends with the meat cutter, and he used to give us the discount specials. I mean, I had $500 a month to live on.
Yeah.
So I remember going to the ATM and I would never take out more than $20 at a time because I would spend more because if I took
I remember
out,
going to the ATM and be worried about having $20 come out.
I just remember being like, as long as I got $20, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And then you can go get Steve's Korean chicken and rice for $3.99, and the dude would give us extra, or my buddy who bartended at Henry's, who we never paid for a drink, or Dollar Wells here, and but here's the thing, man, everybody was poor. So we didn't know, we just knew everybody was broke.
Yeah.
And there was no stress, no taxes, no mortgages. People paid their rent. Towards the end of the month, people were eating beans and rice and hoping to God to get some chicken breast.
You're making it work, man. You're trying to span until your next paycheck.
And that to me was all my books were paid for. So I had every book, and I could read as much as I wanted. And I didn't have to dress, and I didn't have a watch. I drove, had a shitty motorcycle, and it just, it was such a simple existence where I'm here to absorb knowledge and play football. And and I remember there were dudes who were trying to do this and this. And I'm like, man, I really just enjoy being, and I know this is crazy, just enjoyed not having really anything.
Yeah.
It was because I always think
not that you were a monk, but what people would associate that with. They have no external possessions, and they focus on what they have with their hands.
It was I had clothes. I mean, I literally I remember I bought my motorcycle for $300 and I sold it for $300. I paid $80 for the helmet and I sold it for $80. And I remember I packed up I had a 90 or a Ford Bronco when I left there, and I packed it up I literally packed everything I had in the Ford Bronco and drove it to Philadelphia. And I remember the first night I rented a place, I slept on the floor, and the next day I went and I bought furniture.
Yeah.
And I remember I bought a bed and I went to IKEA because I was like, fuck, I'm not spending a lot of money. I might not be here that long.
Yeah.
And to me, I just remember that I went from basically having $20 in my bank account to having a lot more in my bank account.
And that's where the question, where I was going to try to go to with it. I would assume that most people playing in college ball are, I guess, depending on their family background, are probably in that situation. I have no idea the actual money that people get paid into the NFL, but obviously I think the minimum salary now, is $400,000 to $500,000. Sure. Let's just say that most people probably make more than that, especially if they are farther into their career.
Sure.
So you saw and yourself went from a place where money was a limiting factor to, depending on what you were going to get paid, it wouldn't necessarily be a limiting factor. And my question would be, because large sums of money to me don't necessarily make sense. To me, I value my wealth on being able to drive the car that I want to drive. And when I go to dinner with my wife and kids, I can order whatever the hell I want.
Yeah. Well, that's simplistic. There's, so
my question is, what are the mistakes that you saw people making?
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so I used to be big into motorcycles, and I remember me and my buddy. I think you met Bundy. Did you remember me, Teddy?
I did actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So Teddy and I went to Daytona Bike Week, and we used to go to Daytona every year. I went with RC and the guys, and we went to Daytona. And I remember it was just Bundy and I, and we packed up the bikes and we rode up to this place called Peggy's Place. And I remember on the marquee it said Van Zandt Band. And we come in, and RC used to tattoo at this trailer next door. And I remember we're sitting in the back drinking beer in this fucking picnic tables with these old fat fucking bikers. And it's Lynyrd Skynyrd playing their warm-up show because they're going to play on the beach in Daytona to 100,000 the next night. And I remember sitting there and being like, oh shit, this is Johnny Van Zandt, this is fucking Lynyrd Skynyrd. And all of a sudden they start playing Simple Man. And
I don't know a lot about country, so I don't.
Well,
I don't know their records.
Yeah, so Leonard Skinner, yeah, the country, Southern rock, but they play a song Skinner called "Simple Man."
One of
It's
my
like,
favorites.
It's fucking dude. That like it was such a surreal thing. I'm sitting there at these picnic tables in like Ormond Beach at this fucking biker joint called Peggy's Place, I think, and it's like Leonard Skinner playing "Simple Man," and it was the first I'd heard the song before, but it was the first time I actually heard the music and heard the lyrics, and it was like, don't lust for the rich man's gold. You know, everything you have is in your soul. Like, you know, and his mom was saying, like, just be a simple man. And I remember that song and like those lyrics hitting me to the point where I was like, fuck, man, that's the secret of life. Simple. And
so how often did you see people come into the world you were in and had that money with the opposite direction?
Well, what they were trying to do was add complexity to their life. Like I watched dudes who were married with kids with 4 girlfriends and houses, you know, different cars and fucking ulterior lives and different cell phones. And I watched guys like do all this, like, you know, have all this shit and just like endless amounts of fucking layers, to the point where just the thought of like the amount of shit and layers and complexity and bullshit they were doing in their lives gave me fucking anxiety. And I remember being like, the secret of life is fucking simple. Like, you know, have a house you can afford that you like, you know, don't live beyond your means. Like I fucking have driven the same pickup truck since 2006 and I paid it off. I don't like car payments.
You've had that truck since I've known you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I literally will drive the wheels off it. And, you know, I work on cars and like, you know, like the Blazer I traded a motorcycle for, and dude, he parted out a motor, and like, I could definitely drive. And if, you know, I had a twin turbo Porsche and like some epic stuff, and like,
well, you're going to have to explore the space a little bit, I would assume, when you go from that.
What you do, like,
Yeah.
you kind of do this thing where I remember I walked into a car dealership to look at some cars, and like the dude was kind of rude to me a little bit. And I ended up buying a Porsche, and I remember driving it, and a semi lost a tire in front of me and ripped the whole side of the car off and like this, and they totaled the car, and I paid like $115,000 for it, and they handed me a check for like 85. And I remember being like, fuck you, I will never own an expensive car like this again. And I never did it. And that was the last one I ever bought. I never bought another Porsche, never did this. And I just was like, this is stupid. They're going to total this thing. The guy said, well, they can't repaint it and this, and the fucking guy totaled it. And I was young. What I should have done is he probably was going to sell it to his buddy and make money. I didn't know I could buy the car. Long story short.
You could have turned it into a pet project. You could have crushed that thing.
Yeah. And so, but like, to me, it was about like, you know, what do I do well? And like, I realized too, that the richness in your life, like I like think about this, like when you lay on your deathbed, when you're laying there, like your final moments, the last thing you're going to think about is all the shit that you bought.
The physical possessions, yeah.
It does think. You know what you're going to remember? You're going to remember your memories. You're going to look around. You're going to see who's sitting there, and or who's, you know, who's fucking there holding your hand, or more importantly, like the memories that you were able to, you know, bring together with your friends and the influences in this. Like, that's what people are going to remember. They're not going to remember that you had 2 fucking Range Rovers or a private jet or this. You know, people are going to remember how you treated them. And more importantly, you're going to remember the experiences that you had, and not like, you know, we went to Vegas and fucking like they're going to remember, you know, sitting on your beach or sitting, you know, on a lake, you know, come visit in Montana and like teaching my son how to skip stones.
I would say they'll remember how you treated them. And then also, if you want to have something extend beyond your deathbed and beyond yourself, they'll remember the difference that you made in their life and the example that you set for them. That's how I view my kids. I mean, that's the only way I can impact the world around me is by passing that forward generationally. And I have 3 kids, and hopefully they'll have no more than 2 each, because it's a handful when you get to 3, as you know. Yeah. But that can sequentially continue forward, and then it's that domino effect of it gains momentum along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, part of the reason that we packed up everything, we moved to Austin, a big thing was, you know, I was working a ton. I didn't get to see my kids as much. And I was like, you know what, this is bullshit. I'm going to build everything on the property. I want my kids to play outside. I want them to run up to the building, and I want everything to be closer. And, you know, I want to, like, and it was weird. I read this study where they said like 2 hours of uninterrupted noises or sounds of nature is like taking like 6 Xanax or something. They related it.
I can buy that.
But they were like saying like, part of the reason that people have such like anxiety in this is that they are so disconnected from nature, and like just like sitting out there and hearing the noises is like therapeutic. And I wanted to wake up and see wildlife. I didn't want to see neighbors. I didn't want to hear 450 planes a day going over my house in John Wayne, because we lived in John Wayne's flight path in Dover Shores.
Yeah, you did.
Which is a beautiful fucking place. But dude, I was like, I remember waking up one morning and being like, baby, we can't live here no more. Like, we got to go. And
so how's it been? Because you beat me by about 6 months out of California.
I remember I told you I sold the house and moved, and you were like, we're fucking out of here too. And it was just about the time that I moved, because we got out here right about right after Christmas, like a day. And then I remember you guys were in Montana for Christmas, and you came back and you said, dude, we're not coming back
that was
to California.
That was truly the straw that broke the camel's back. And it was a combination of small things, but more than anything, it was the difference I saw in the kids. Yeah. Like, please come inside, you're purple, you're hypothermic, I need you. Go play your video game for 20 minutes by the fire, as opposed to California where it's like, give me your phone and your video game and go outside. It just was a completely different environment.
No, I mean, and I wanted to have a gym on the property. Like, I wanted to have my own weights. I wanted to have like a place where I could work on my stuff, and I wanted to be able to have like an office and all that. And we were able to build it here. And like, I want my kid. And here's the thing too. I always think about this. Like, I always wonder how I will be remembered, not by people that didn't know me, but by my own children. And
those are the only memories that
I mean,
matter anyway.
But that's what people are always like, oh, my, when somebody writes my obituary and this, and I'm like, I don't really give a shit on the obituary thing, which is written for like somebody telling people about you. I want my kids to reflect back and be like, tell them stories about, tell them stories about their dad. Be like, when I was like 6 years old, my dad, we were 5, like we packed up, we moved everything to Austin on this like ranch, and like, and like tell these stories. And like, my dad like piece of shit old trucks, and we used to like ride around on the property in them, and his buddies used to like show up, and it just so happened that all of his buddies are like world famous Navy SEALs and these guys and here, and it's like, I want them to have these memories to be like, oh, you mean, Uncle Andy and Uncle Dave and these guys, and then like them growing up and then like reading stories about these people.
Yeah.
And then realizing like, holy shit, like these were my dad's friends. And, or, something like the Power Athlete Symposium. And I remember them being like, so all these people come to hang out with you guys? Like, and then like them seeing like, not only did I have this really killer experience to go to college and then, go out and play in the NFL, but it was, and then be able to go into this other kind of, different career in terms of, performance. And what's really kind of interesting is when I started down this path, I mean, just being a fairly introspective, like constant, introspective, like constantly looking in within myself, like kind of trying to figure it out. It was like a splinter in my mind. And the only thing I can say is I couldn't figure out what the overarching kind of umbrella for performance was. And I kept thinking like there has to be something more. It's not fitness, it's not this, it's not muscle, it's not strength, it's not like what is it? And I realized that the single greatest basically barometer, or really the deciding factor for all human movement is athleticism. There isn't a single thing out there, whether it be the CrossFit Games or Cameron Hayes, hunting, or Joe Rogan, fucking Conor McGregor in the on the octagon. It doesn't matter if you're playing football. The more you the better athlete, the more athletic you are, the better you can move, and is really what everybody's searching for. And I sat down. I thought, if it's athleticism, and I can define athleticism and I can understand athleticism, then I can basically reverse engineer and train athleticism.
Teach it, yep.
And this is really what Power Athlete's about, the idea of unlocking athletic potential and understanding how to foster and develop athleticism. And it came back, I did a talk at this thing called the Black Box Summit, and they asked me to do a talk, and I've been really kind of just mentally thinking about this thing called what is athleticism. And as I was creating the talk and I was writing it down, all of a sudden I had this like wonderful conversation with myself where I was like, man, this is what we've been doing. This is the technology. This is what I've been searching for my whole life. And I have to create a definition, right? And unlike, like my favorite was when Glassman said nobody defined fitness before me. Well, everybody's defined fitness. But I remember being like, if it's self-serving, if increased work capacity, broad time modal domains is the self-serving definition for the training style, then I want to create a universal definition for athleticism that I can effectively support with my training style. So I started working on it, and it was the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space to accomplish a known or novel task. And that's how I defined athleticism. And then I went through and defined primal movements and time and space and seamless and effortless, and you kind of go through all these pieces. And it's a roadmap for how to develop and foster athleticism and how to unlock athletic potential. And what I realized too is that fitness, they call it a continuum, but it's really a spectrum, which I always laugh about. So it's either here or there, but a continuum is a never-ending line. Athleticism is and I call it the athleticism continuum, is the fucking continuous athletic. I mean, it's never ending. Where you start on the athleticism continuum is based off of genetics, geography, and opportunity. What are the genetics, what opportunities you had, and the geography, like where you born around it. If you want to be a world-class elk hunter, you better grow up in Montana or somewhere where they have elk. World-class elk hunters probably aren't from Texas. They're good at hunting, because they probably
unless they moved earlier, they spent a lot of time up in places that are elk country.
Yeah, but I mean, you grow up in South Texas, you hunt deer and you hunt hogs.
Yeah.
And so this conversation really grew, and it was that moment that I realized the technology I was developing was helping people realize where they are on the athleticism continuum and then extending it forever. And I remember I gave the talk, and Rob Wolf, who was there too, comes over to me and he goes, Jesus Christ. He goes, dude, that was fucking unbelievable. And I was like, you like it? He goes, you just answered every question that we tried to answer when I first came into CrossFit and we thought it was fitness. He goes, if you would have given that talk in the early 2000s, it would have altered the trajectory. He's like at that, and even Rob said that it altered his complete mindset for training.
It's powerful when you change your perspective like that.
And I remember Rob being like, I helped Rob put together a template, and he still uses it to this day. And he's like, it's probably the best training template I've ever used, and I use it. And people ask me all the time, Rob, doing training? He's like, it's something that John wrote for me based off of his athleticism model.
It works, man. We're almost out of time because they're going to come through the door in a second. I got one more question for you based off of perspective, and that is, since you're the only pro bowler that I know, what do you think of the state of the current NFL?
I think in terms of guys kneeling, that people have the right to silent protest. The problem is that the NFL is a private entity, and the owners have the right to look and say, okay, this is a business. We have sponsors. We have all this other, river of dirty money flowing through. And this, if guys kneeling is going to affect the bottom line, then we have to fix this. So you have this interesting power struggle where you have people that are private employees, not a public company, not publicly traded, private employees that are doing something that negatively affects the bottom line of the corporation. So, for me, yes, people have the right to silent protest, but they also have the right to not get hired again based off of this. Now, I think it's fucking awesome for the mere fact that I have never in my life hoped for the demise of something as much as I've hoped for the demise of the NFL. And I'll tell you why. Because the owners are by far the biggest fucking crooks on the planet. Did you know the NFL teams are nonprofits? They have nonprofits.
How dare they?
Yeah, they're nonprofits.
Well, anybody can be. It just means you can't show profit at the end of the year.
And they don't. You know why? Because they just pay themselves big bonuses.
There you go.
And the river of dirty money and hustles and this and manipulation, and the fact that this whole concussion thing started because they didn't want to give us health insurance past 5 years. So every other professional sport gives lifetime medical benefits, except the NFL, it's only 5 years. So after that shit came up, guys were having problems. And then they lied to us. When I came in the NFL, they told me, you get a concussion when you get knocked unconscious. When I left the NFL, they said, you'll know you get a concussion when you hit your head and you go cross-eyed, you feel bells ring, something.
They've backed that off so much further than even just that.
Well, I know, but then they were like, well, I've never been knocked unconscious. And the guy's like, what about this definition? I'm like, I don't know, 70 to 200 times a day for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And, so to me, the teams knew about it. The owners have, I always joke, man, that at the end of the day, those guys got paid in fucking, 30 pieces of silver with Judas, those guys have made their fortunes on the backs of players, and guys killing themselves, they could give two shits. So I think that they have vested responsibility to. It's just like in America, like you send guys over to war, and those guys get fucked up. You have a responsibility to take care of your troops. You have a responsibility to take care of your people. Like I have the responsibility to take care of my children. And you know what? Like here's nothing, and this is just a personal rant, but like being a parent's extremely like unselfish. Kids are selfish, most selfish beings on the planet. So like I was selfish when I was a child, and then you grow into it, and now it's my children's time to be selfish, and it's an unselfish time in my life. And what drives me fucking crazy is when parents are fucking so selfish that they'd be like, oh, well, I'm just not, stimulated. I'm going to do this. And you're like, okay, so you don't get the right to fucking be a shitty parent and ruin your child's life because you're not being fucking met. You had your selfish time. Be unselfish and fucking allow somebody to grow. I'm like, dude, there's a lot of shit that like I don't get to do because I have, a wife and kids and a responsibility. And it's like, well, I just, not feeling complete. Fuck you. Be an adult. And you know what your responsibility is? If you're going to have these little offspring, be the best fucking father you can.
Yep.
And you know what? Like, bury that shit, put it aside. Like, everybody lives in this fucking, like, I have to be complete, me as emotion, and it just drives me crazy. So be a good father, go to sleep early, lift weights, train, be nice to your wife so she doesn't drive you and the kids crazy. And, try to just be a simple man.
That's it. Let's go open the symposium.
Roger that.
Thanks for the support, everyone. It's been an interesting ride. I actually shouldn't have been able to post this podcast today because I should have been landing in Europe. But I'm looking out my window at the Mall of America in Minneapolis, St. Paul, where I'm currently delayed with no bags. But Delta Airlines, thank you very much for the toothbrush you gave me. I have some very colorful words that I would like to use to describe how I feel currently about that airline, but I'm going to take a pass on that. I got rebooked. Hopefully I'm taking off. Hopefully my bags will show up. I don't know. Maybe I'll hunt with rocks. We shall see. And I don't even know how I got started talking about Delta Airlines. But thank you, everybody, for the constant support. The hats I'm burning through those hats at a rate faster than I ever thought possible. Sweatshirts are back in stock. Got everything loaded up in case you have that special someone that just needs a t-shirt, a sweatshirt, or a hat under the tree. I'm just saying, I can get it to you before Christmas. But in all seriousness, thank you everybody again for the support, the reviews, the feedback, people reaching out via email. Please keep it coming. It drives me to keep doing what I'm doing. And I think the next podcast I'm going to put up will be from France. Hopefully.